Absolutely. And you just had me thinking back to, not to throw Jeremy Colleton under the bus here, but a Blackhawks team that was certainly more talented than the roster they had in the second half this year, all year long. This Blackhawks team had, I think, 3 8-game losing streaks in 2021, 2022. And they might have had one of those maybe this year, but as you referenced, like the effort level and the consistency, even if they're still losing games, it's in a much better fashion. And as you referenced, having these kind of guys who are putting together a hungry roster like Kyle Davidson did, those guys are players that even when the season may look lost, they're trying to prove something to not only Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks, but other teams around there that they could still play. So I think it's been a very interesting and really excellent dynamic between Kyle Davidson and Luke Richardson so far in their first year together. I also wanted to ask you about kind of going back to Kyle Davidson's patient approach a little bit as far as kind of looking at what we could see next season. It sounds like we're going to see, particularly on the back end, a lot of guys trying to make that full-time leap as NHLers. Obviously, Lucas Reichel is kind of in a conversation of his own, and we'll get to him in just a second, but the Blackhawks obviously signed Wyatt Kaiser to his entry-level contract at the end of last year. It sounds like the feelings about him is that he's going to be NHL ready at the start of next year. Alex Vlasic and Isaac Phillips are two guys that we've kind of seen on and off at times these last couple of seasons. And then I'll also throw Arvid Soderblom in there in net as well. It feels like because these guys are stepping onto the scene, and obviously Davidson doesn't want to rush into things. That's kind of another reason why the Blackhawks aren't going to go spending all of their money this offseason, because they have some players that I think they'd like to see what they have, again, as full-time NHLers next year. Out of those guys that I just referenced, I guess we'll just do the 3 defensemen: Wyatt Kaiser, Isaac Phillips, and Alex Vlasic. Which one of those 3 would you say you personally would be the highest on and think can have the biggest impact for the Blackhawks here moving forward? I'm high on all 3 of those guys, but I'm just curious to hear kind of your thoughts on that.
I'm definitely high on all 3 as well. I am a little torn between Isaac Phillips and Alex Vlasic. I tend to lean a little bit more towards Isaac Phillips just because his game seemed a lot more consistent in both Rockford and with the Hawks. Just love his size, love what he's learning from Seth Jones. Vlasic, kind of the same thing as well. And then you go to the goalie situation, Arvid Soderblom too. I mean, he came up in such a unique situation last year because he wasn't supposed to be getting all this NHL experience. Neither was Jackson Stauber, but yet they both were because of what was going on with all these injuries in the goaltending position for the Hawks. But again, it goes back to the depth. It goes back to the situation, how Kyle Davidson built this. Like he's not relying on these prospects to make the leap that they need to make right now. He's playing it out and kind of letting them choose their own destiny. I do feel like for Phillips and Vlasic, this is an opportunity to get the majority of their time at the NHL level, see how they sink or swim. But also you can't jump to any conclusions because this will be or would be their first full year at the NHL level. There's a lot of growing pains and there's a lot of things to still grow and develop with. And they're still young guys. And I mean, everyone likes to bring up the Brent Seabrook comparison, but even Brent Seabrook took a little bit to fully turn into the probably Hall of Fame defender that he's going to be. But that is what I like about this upcoming year is you can pinpoint these guys. I was saying we were going to see it last year, but that was kind of the saving grace of the season because we knew we were coming into watching a rebuilding season with the Hawks. So this is more of an opportunity to put all these players under the microscope and really zone in on, okay, what are they doing better? Are they improving in this aspect? What does Luke Richardson think about these guys? How much responsibility and confidence is he having in each one of these guys? But back to your original question, I do lean a little bit more towards Isaac Phillips. I could be wrong with that, but that's just who I've liked the most in terms of overall improvement over the past year.
I actually agree with you. His jump that he took last season, especially offensively, I knew he's a big guy and can handle his own on defense, but I thought for Rockford too, he really made improvements on the offensive side of things, and I'm very interested to see if/how that's going to work for the Blackhawks next year. But yeah, I think it's a really good spot for the Blackhawks to be in, to kind of not rush these guys into a spot, but kind of let them go feel it out next year. And then you can also just get a better understanding of where these guys are at, who still needs a little bit more time. And also, bigger picture, you kind of look at the Blackhawks as a whole and start to understand maybe this is where we got to add a piece in the future. This is where we're going to need some more stuff when they do start getting to that time where they're actively getting aggressive in free agency and pursuing some more targets than right now. So I do think it's a really good spot for all three of those defensemen to come into. And speaking of defenseman prospects, a very intriguing one for the Blackhawks, of course, the 7th overall pick from last year's draft, Kevin Korchinski. And there's been some conversations about whether he's going to remain in the WHL next year with the Seattle Thunderbirds, or if he's going to make the jump to the professional level. I actually saw something from Scott Powers on Twitter recently suggesting that the Blackhawks are probably going to burn the year either way just to get him to that next deal a little bit sooner. What are kind of your thoughts on Korchinski's position right now? Are you leaning one way or the other? And what do you kind of, what do you just think about that entire situation? You think it would be better for him to stay, or do you think if he's ready, the Blackhawks should have him now?
Yeah, it's tough to tell because, I'd hate to say all this talk about the slow progress of development and not who used the term? It's over marinate when they're down at the level that they shouldn't be. But you don't want to move them up too quickly either. I'm mixing up GM's phrases, but I guess it depends on the player. But Kevin Korchinski has already taken such a big step, and he was already turning so many heads at last year's prospect camp. I mean, I remember his ability to just his stick hand-eye coordination was just something. Just one of those things you can't teach. He's able to just always locate the puck with his stick, whether he's got it or whether he's trying to get it. And that was right from the get-go. That was at prospect camp. Obviously, on a long run with Seattle. World Juniors with Connor Bedard, was getting involved in the offense there as well. Really hard to find negative things about Kevin Korchinski's game. So it's tough to tell. I don't want to jump to a conclusion either way, because I feel like if you're going to continue this patient approach, then you might as well stick with it. But sometimes he just might be at the level where he needs to move on. He played a couple of preseason games last year, and people were expecting to see him play a couple more, but then the Hawks were like, all right, we're going to pull him back. Just really like his overall game. Great two-way player for a defenseman, which I know is kind of against what the Hawks were going for once they did switch GMs. Stan Bowman was such a guy that wanted to see offensive scoring defensemen. That's the way the league was kind of looking like it was going. Then it did make a right turn and going back to hard-nosed, gritty defensemen. And that's kind of the way the Hawks went that direction once again. But Korchinski's the exception because he does have an offensive game to him. So yeah, I'm really interested to see what they do with him. But he's been making so many strides and just really impressing, experts and scouts and draft evaluators. So I think he might be the most interesting guy to follow in terms of what types of strides he makes this year and just the decision-making that goes into all of it.
Yeah, I can't really pinpoint one way or the other, like which way he should go, because we've seen the Blackhawks be so patient with guys. I think it would make sense to see him go back to Seattle, but at the same time, he just put up incredible numbers for the Thunderbirds again this season. I don't know if he has a whole lot to prove there, so it's going to be interesting to see how the Blackhawks kind of maneuver through that one, especially with, as we just talked about, 3 left-handed defensemen in Vlasic, Phillips, and Kaiser, all trying to make that leap to the NHL next season as well. Joe, I got a couple more questions for you before I'll let you get on out of here. I know you got some other things going on here this afternoon. Former Blackhawk 40-goal scorer, 2-time 40-goal scorer, Alex DeBrincat has been in the news as of late, as it seems like he's back on the trade block after just spending 1 year with the Ottawa Senators. And we talked earlier about some of the moves maybe not making sense at the time, that being one of them. Trading DeBrincat to Ottawa looks pretty darn good considering what he's going through with the Senators right now. Just curious, it obviously seems like the Blackhawks aren't going to be trading for him this offseason. It would go against everything Kyle Davidson has said. But I'm just curious, would you be interested in a potential DeBrincat reunion if he were to hit the free agent market in the summer of 2024? Or would you be more so on the side of passing on the cat and looking at some other options?
I'd definitely be in favor of it. I mean, what an exciting player to watch and follow and report on. It's tough for me to see it happening, though. If he were a free agent in maybe 2 years or 3, then we're talking about a different situation. But again, Kyle Davidson is probably going to stay patient with this rebuilding plan. And I'm not saying you're wrong that the DeBrincat trade looks to be the right move. I think it looks to be the right move now, still because of what Kevin Korchinski is. The DeBrincat trade wasn't so much not having faith in DeBrincat. It was Davidson having faith in his plan moving forward. Even if Alex DeBrincat had another 40-goal season and helped the Ottawa Senators into the playoffs, I still think Kyle Davidson was going to make the move he wanted to make because he wanted to move forward with his decision-making and his plan. But man, is he a fun player to watch. I do think it's different without Patrick Kane on this team, though, too. I mean, if Kane is on this team and there's a place for DeBrincat, then we're talking about a totally different situation. But again, how much Alex DeBrincat loved his time in Chicago. Going back to the argument of you make this place a prime destination for free agents, word gets around the league how favorable it is to live in Chicago, to play for Luke Richardson. And those things can end up working out in your favor down the line. I know DeBrincat didn't play under Richardson. I'm just saying, to create this very favorable spot for NHL free agents, it all falls under the same type of thing. Yes, I would love to see DeBrincat back. Do I think it's going to happen? No.
I'm in that same boat. It just seems like that ship has kind of sailed. We got a new regime here. They're doing their own thing. It's a new era. Would I love to see it? Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love 40 goal scorers that are the same height as me, 5'7", $1.0, and lighting up the NHL? I love to see it. But for all the Blackhawks fans out there saying, bring Alex DeBrincat back, I would say it's pretty unlikely at this point in time, even if he does end up hitting the market in 2024. You just referenced Patrick Kane. Not to put you on the spot here or anything, Joe, but obviously he and Jonathan Toews are set to become unrestricted free agents on July 1st for the first time in their respective and historic NHL careers. Obviously, Toews is in a little bit of a different boat because retirement seems to be on the table potentially. Again, not to put you on the spot and come to a conclusion here, but if you
I don't know where either of them are going, if that's what
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you had to lean one way or another for Jonathan Toews, would you guess that he's coming back, or would you more so lean towards he really does think retirement is on the table right now?
If he weren't such a competitive guy, I would totally lean towards him being done. That send-off he had at the United Center, I mean, how do you have a better send-off? It's funny, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I forget why I was thinking about it. Maybe I was just watching the game. But if a player stays with a team for their entire career, how much more iconic of a jersey is that? Like when fans go to Disney World and you see a Blackhawks fan walking up, red sweater at Disney World, and you don't see a C, you don't see an A, so I know that kind of can give away who it can be. But you probably think the other side says Patrick Kane. But now he went to the Rangers to finish off the year. I know there were a lot of Rangers jerseys and jerseys sold because of that. But you see a Blackhawks jersey walking up with a C on it, you're assuming it's Jonathan Toews. I don't know how much that changes when he moves on, but it's just an aspect that I never really thought of in terms of a player staying with one team their entire career. And I think there's a part of Jonathan Toews that wants that. I have nothing to back it on. He clearly was the heartbeat of the team for so long. I think he loves that was part of his legacy, that was part of the Blackhawks legacy with him being such a big part of it. And again, the send-off that he had, he was able to finish off the year on his own terms, I'll say, because we're not quite sure if it's his career. Maybe 3 years, again, playing the hypothetical thing. If he does stick around and plays, and 3 years from now, let's say he's still playing, again, very hypothetical, maybe he signs like a 1-year contract with the Hawks. Like if any of that were to happen, he's always going to have that in the back of his head of finishing his career with the Blackhawks. He has the opportunity to do that right now. So I would lean towards him being done. But again, he is such a competitive guy. He's such a proud guy. I think he was very proud of the way he bounced back after being out an entire year. I think he was proud of the way he bounced back this past season to come back when a lot of people were doubting he was going to return. So he has an opportunity to do that again. Will it happen? Will he do it? I don't know. That's tough.
That competitiveness that you bring up is really the only thing that I could think of why Jonathan Toews would come back at this point. I mean, he's achieved everything, been to the top of the mountain, a winner at every level that he's played for. And you reference playing for, an original 6 franchise, being the captain all those years there. I do think there is something to be said about that with Jonathan Toews, a guy who is very prideful. And you mentioned the bounce back year that he had in the first half of the regular season. He was really solid. And remember when the Blackhawks got off to that like 6-3-1 start? I think Toews had like 8 points, 9 points in his first 10 games.
This past year was the quickest he's gotten to 11 goals in his entire career.
Yeah, I mean, he had a really strong season. And hearing him talk about it at the end of the year too, talking about saying how, thinking about some things that he wouldn't have been able to do if he's playing hockey, like they do sound intriguing. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Toews calls it quits either. The only thing it sounds like that both of us draw back on is that competitive nature of his, and we'll see if that pulls him out here in the summer to return. The final question I have for you, Joe, I know we've kind of rambled on here, which I apologize for, is the 2023 Stanley Cup final and the entire Stanley Cup playoffs, which is been nothing short of tremendous. And I saw that you tweeted out last night after Matthew Tkachuk's game-tying goal. Is this the turning point in the series? I'm going to ask you, is it the turning point of the series? Do you think the Panthers got enough to muster their way back, or is it still Vegas series to win?
For the sake of me seeming like Nostradamus, yes, I will say it is the turning point of the series. Because I kind of lost a lot of faith in Florida in the first couple of games. I mean, finally showing that Bobrovsky, has flaws, is human, led me to believe that Vegas is just going to kind of steamroll through this series. Now you put the heroics of Matthew Tkachuk once again, that he's done so well on this playoff run. I think he's really eager just to show how elite of a player he can be if he can help turn a team around for an entire series. So it gives them an opportunity, not to mention fighting off a rough penalty at the end of regulation last night and killing it off at the beginning of overtime. I know it's different, when you get that break in the intermission before coming up to overtime, but that's a gutsy win by Florida. And it's at home. You get a spark of the crowd. All of a sudden, game 4 is going to matter a lot because 3-1's a lot different than 2-2. But if there's going to be a turning point in the series, why not be your leader and the guy who's done the unthinkable this entire playoff run? It's been a fun Stanley Cup run, though. I like the matchup of these two teams. I like the idea that somebody's going to win the Stanley Cup for the first time ever. I like how competitive the expansion teams are with both Vegas and Seattle, because it just kind of goes to show what type of sport hockey is, how much of a team sport it is. And again, the Edmonton Oilers not getting to the Cup final, another example of it's not going to take just Connor Bedard to turn this Blackhawks team around. It's going to take depth. It's going to take a couple of role players. And I know the main argument of, you get a Vegas market and the Miami market, and what kind of final is that? But I don't totally agree with that. I think hockey fans are going to watch what they want to watch, and Matthew Tkachuk made it very interesting last night. So hopefully I'm right with game 4. If it gets tied up 2-2, and I feel like it changes the whole outlook of the series, let alone just that game. I mean, you're already guaranteed 6 games if they go 2-2. And we've seen how many times this summer have we seen a team get a 3-0 lead, get a 3-1 lead, the other team start to come back, but not quite be able to overcome it. So I'm really rooting for Florida in Game 4, and then after that, just have at it. I think I was thinking Vegas was going to be the better team heading into this series, but man, Florida is just really going to show you that it just matters how hot you are. Sneak into the playoffs any way that you can. They should be still thanking the Blackhawks for beating Pittsburgh in the penultimate game during the regular season. But yeah, go Florida for Game 4 to make things even more interesting.
Don't forget to vote Buddy Robinson for Florida Panthers.
Oh God, yes.
If they wind up winning the Stanley Cup. But yeah, it's been an excellent series so far. I'm so glad that we do have a series and a huge Game 4 tilt on Saturday night down in Sunrise. That's going to be ecstatic. And as you mentioned, a great reminder of why hockey is so amazing. It's a postseason unlike any other because you start playing well at the right time, get hot at the right time of the year, ride a good goaltender. Doesn't matter what seed you got in with, doesn't matter how you did it. That's what I love about hockey in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and this series has been nothing short of great so far. So super excited for Game 4 on Saturday night, and I'm rooting for the Panthers along with you. Hopefully they'll be able to even this thing up going back to Vegas for Game 5. But, Joe, I've already taken up enough of your time. I apologize again for this thing running 45 minutes, but thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you coming on the show. I know all my listeners out there do as well, and looking forward to hearing your voice a whole lot more once we get back into Blackhawks season here in the fall, and would love to have you back on for another chat when that time rolls around, buddy.
Hey, no problem, Jack. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure as always. Keep up the great work.
Hey, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you. And thank you again to all the listeners out there for tuning into this episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Real quick reminder that you can follow along for free on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to do that real quick so you can get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each and every day.